We have different types of elves according to some elf scientists, so to speak. I once had an interview with the headmaster of the elf school, and he told me about 50 types of elves that are living in Iceland.
The Kodega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Kodega and sharing one of yours. All right, picture this. It's the middle of winter in Iceland, back in the late 90s. A road construction crew was working near a large boulder, known locally as an elf's home. Everything was going smoothly until their equipment suddenly stopped working. Bulldozers wouldn't even start, drills snapped, and even the workers began reporting strange feelings, like they were being watched. Now, Icelanders, being who they are, didn't shrug it off. They called in a locuseer to communicate with the elves. After a bit of negotiation, it was determined that the elves were upset because their home was being disturbed. The solution? They moved the boulder to a safer location with care and respect. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as the rock was relocated, the equipment started working perfectly again. Hey everyone, as usual, I'm your guide, Bribe, the Kodega. And stories like these aren't just campfire tales in Iceland. They're woven into everyday life. And today, we're diving deep into these fascinating beliefs with someone who knows more about elves than most people know about their own neighbors. And I hope to get his name right here, but we'll see what I can do. Valur Heiðar Sævarsson. We'll explain the history, the legends, and maybe even some first-hand encounters. And if you ever find yourself in Iceland, you'll need to look up Valor, as he and I have something in common. You already know that the Kodega is a guide and a storyteller, as you saw in the opening. And Valor is as well a guide and a storyteller. He runs a company, your friend in Iceland. So make sure you look him up if you're headed that way. All right, so everybody, I want you to settle in, get ready. And here we go. We are going to jump into the Icelandic elves. Let's bring Valor to the stage. Valor, welcome to Kodega's Codex of Curiosities.
Thank you. My company's name is Your Friend in Reykjavik, just to start off. But
okay, and there we go. I messed up already. Okay,
and we'll discuss the name a little bit later. But no.
Okay, yeah, Reykjavik. So your friend in Reykjavik.
Yeah,
yes,
I'm teasing you.
That's all right. Hey, no, that's okay. Please correct me. I make some good mistakes every now and then. So why don't you tell? Okay, so let's do this then. Why don't you tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself, including your company, and where they can find you?
Yeah. My name is Valur, Your Friend in Reykjavik, and I started this tour business like 10 years ago. I've been a guide for a longer and storyteller for a longer period than that. And we do all kinds of food tours and walking experiences, folklore tours, talking about the elves of Iceland. We are launching a storytelling experience where you can sit at a nice bar and listen to stories over a cold beer or a hot cocoa, and then we also do private tours, Golden Circle, South Coast, and everything like that, and then transfers, basic transfers, like from the airport to a hotel, and what we call transfers and tours, where you have like 5 hours to spare, 6 hours to spare, and then we do a transfer and tour, pick you up, do a tour talking about whatever you are interested in. If you want to explore the Reykjanes Peninsula area or Reykjavik or so forth, and then drop you off. So we basically do a little bit of everything. We also provide guide services. So yeah, if you happen to have an interest in coming to Iceland, then Your Friend in Reykjavik is the company and people to talk to.
And I know a lot of people will probably say that just because they have you on the show. Oh, yeah, I want to go to Iceland. I'll be honest, that's a place that I've always it's on the top of my list. So maybe if this show really hits it big, I'll be visiting Iceland, and you can take me on some tours, because I find it absolutely fascinating. It is a beautiful, beautiful place with some really rich history, and like my favorite band is from Iceland. I'm sure everybody knows of Monsters and Men, and they are my favorite band. I've I love them.
Yeah, I thought you would say Seguros just because of the elf connection. They sing
Oh,
like the elves, but of monsters and men, very good, cool, and yeah, we have also Kaleo and Björk, of course. So yeah, a
there we go.
lot of beautiful music and musicians, and yeah, we'll get to that. Why if you think about that, Icelanders are only 390,000 ish people, and 1/5 of that is immigrants. People that are let's talk let's say 300,000 plus. It's remarkable how many musicians, artists, writers, very creative. I think it's the long winters when you are inside and you tend to get more creative, and that, I think this is a part of that.
So why don't we start with a little bit of history in Iceland? I'm sure you're well versed in that. Can we give us a little background history in Iceland?
Yeah, so Iceland was settled according to our greatest heritage is the Icelandic sagas. There are books that are written 12th, 13th century. Uh, some of them talk about the settlement of Iceland and various family feuds and so forth in the settlement and the beginning of settlement of Iceland. And then we also have the prose Edda, the poetic Edda. All the Norse mythology comes from the Icelandic sagas written in Iceland, and all the stories about Thor and Loki and Odin and the chief gods and so forth. All that. There's also like history of Norwegian kings. So a lot of uh, yeah, history of this region, of the North European region, is depicted in these books, and so very. This is like our gift to the world, what we are, and that's why one of the reasons why we call ourselves the Saga Nation, the country of sagas. It's kind of like ingrained in our DNA. This is our proudest accomplishment in regards of telling these stories, and I think that's also a part of our folklore and why we'll get to that in regards of the elves and so forth.
Uh, of course, of course. And before we get to the elves, I just have one question. With all this attention by Marvel drawn into Norse mythology with like Thor and Odin, do you find an increase in tourists because of that, or an increase in people wanting to learn more, and do you find it that there is it's strained, have they taken it too far in a wrong direction away from the true mythology of it?
Well, Marvel is Marvel.
Yeah. Yes.
It's these characters, even though they have foundations in something, it's its own thing, and I love Marvel. But is it closely resembled to the original stories? No. But Loki is the trickster god, and up to his usual mischief and so forth. But and has it grown tourism in Iceland? No, but a lot of people are curious about the Norse mythology, and they when they travel to Iceland, they see these books that are available in regards of the Norse mythology, the Old Norse gods. Neil Gaiman has written a nice recount of some of the stories actually that are from the from these poetic Edda and so forth. So so obviously, I think it just helps. I think it's a wonderful way of keeping these gods alive in today's
Yeah.
society,
To keep
and
them relevant, I guess, in a way
yeah,
you could
keep
say
them
it as well.
relevant, and,
Hmm.
and so I think it's a wonderful, and this is of course a topic of some of our walks. We delve a little bit into these myths and yeah, some of these stories that are and around these gods.
Fantastic. Okay. So let's direct this I'm going to direct this conversation now into the elves, and I found that they're also called the Huldufólk. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, Huldufólk, or the hidden
Oy.
people.
Okay. Or sorry, or
Huldufólk,
hidden people. You said.
the hidden people. Yes.
Okay. Let's go into this. So let's start with it. I don't even know where to start. Let's start in the history maybe of it all, and continue forward from that?
So the settlement of Iceland, according to the is roughly at the end of the ninth century, 874, according to the Book of Settlements. So 874, that's where the first settler arrived from Norway, fleeing taxation from Norway, and a lot of people from that area then followed suit. Kind of like there was plenty of land to be had, and everything was fully settled in Norway and more places also. So there you could claim your kind of like claim to the land. Uh, but interestingly enough, a lot of people also came were Celtic. So uh, slaves, or were the Norwegian Vikings on the way to Iceland. They dropped on the British Isles, asked the woman there politely, "Would you like to go to a cruise to the north with me?" And they just happily obliged. I'm not sure, but interesting enough, the DNA shows that roughly 90% of males have the close DNA to Norwegians, while women are close to 50-50. So in of the
Interesting.
DNA. So,
Yeah.
but if you think about it, folklore, we have the old Norse folklore about these huge trolls, for example, and other beings, and then we have the Celtic folklore with creatures that live in the hills, and here in Iceland, these folklore mended together really nicely and created its own mythology. And and of course, we had some creatures that have lived here for before human settlement. So with that, also it was like a melting pot of different ideology and stories. So really beautiful, and it's still in our DNA today. So we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I find that fascinating. So these elves, when was the first time you ever heard about the elves in here? Was there any experiences with family members or friends, or was it your parents passing down stories of, like, stay in at night or don't go there at night or something like that, or was there anything like that?
So uh, uh, let's start from the beginning. So the
Please, please.
origins of the hidden people. So one of the stories, the genesis of the hidden people, is that uh, so when Adam and Eve, uh, they had several children, and one day God came to visit, and Eve hadn't bathed some of her children, so she hid them away. And when God asked, she showed them several of the children, and uh, and God asked, "Where are the rest?" And she committed the fault of lying that these are all the only children. And God, being the all-knowing that He is, then He said that, well, for eternity, uh, the children that you hid will be called the hidden people, and they will be hidden from the sight of man unless they want to show themselves. So that's the origin, the hidden people. Okay, so uh, what are the hidden people? And because there are different types of elves in Iceland. There are several different types of elves, but the most common, like the the ones that you mentioned earlier in regards of road construction, where they thought that the people, the elf, it was an elf house or an elf church. Uh, they are called Huldufólk, or the hidden people, and they are a lot like us, just a little bit thinner, a little bit taller, a little bit more beautiful, and a little bit richer. And they actually, they did all the, all the same things, like, or most of the some things. It's a little bit different story from story. Most of the same thing. They were farmers. They were uh, sailors. They were fishing, and they had children and so forth. And so. just a little bit more beautiful version of ourselves. And uh, and if you think about all the beautiful, all the darkness in Iceland, you if there was a stories about a beautiful elf palace just inside the next rock, or this is an elf church where the elves would hold masses and so forth. It enriches and enlivens the environment. And the elves in Iceland are closely related to nature. If you look at many of the stories, they are very closely related to nature in regards of that you should not disturb nature. You don't know what could happen. You should not throw stones there. You should not spoil nature. You should not. You should be careful what you're doing. You know, it's a lot of fables there. In regards of you should not do this or not do that.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, so they seem to be like of course they're tied in. We'd say with the Fae folk, which always seem to associate with nature spirits and keeping nature safe and whatnot, or protectors or watchers of nature. So that's interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and so these more slender, beautiful people. They live within these rocks. Then they're like, how is that? You know, how do we see that? Can we enter those rocks, or how does
Yeah,
that
yeah.
work?
So there are many stories in regards of people getting lost in a blizzard or a fog, and then they see a small light ahead, and then there's a door there. They go into the door, and there they are basically uh, greeted by beautiful people that take care of them and shelter them until the next day. And when they leave the next day, they are basically they uh, they understand their surroundings. Yeah, now now I'm just in the middle of nowhere, but this rock over there, and understand that it's a home of the elves. So yeah, they live among us in nature. They according to some stories, they move around during special days, especially like winter solstice and summer solstice, and some say New Year's Eve. And it's very you should be very mindful that you should not should not accept anything from the elves during that because when they're traveling and according to the story, so it's basically you set yourself up at a crossroads when they are traveling, when they are moving house, and when the elves pass you, they try to give you things. They try to give you gold and diamonds and beautiful clothes, but you must not accept anything because if you accept it, you go crazy. And and so one famous story is about this guy that decided he was like a poor farmer's hand and he wanted to you know, try out his luck. And he set himself on New Year's Eve and sat by the crossroads. And when the elves passed, they asked him, they want to give him beautiful horse. They wanted to give him, gold and glitter. And he said, no, 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 I will not accept anything until when the daybreak, until the sun was nearly coming up. Uh, then they offered him basically fat, which is very valuable at the time when in the middle of winter you're fatty things called mör, flot in Icelandic, flot, basically a sheep fat. And then he says, "Aldrei hef ég flotinu neitað." I will never say no to the fat. And he takes a bite and goes crazy. Uh, if you are able to survive the night without accepting anything, then you'll get a lot of gold and glitter and stuff from the elves as a gift for withstanding their temptation, so to speak. So yeah, I feel like I'm rambling here. There are so many different stories
No,
about
no, no. That's good.
different
No,
aspects.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So you said there was different kinds of the Huldufólk. What?
No,
So you
so
explained the
Huldufólk is
one.
one type of elf, but but
Okay,
but uh,
okay.
but then we have we have flower elves and we have different uh, types of elves according to some elf scientists, so to speak. I once went had an interview with the headmaster of the elf school, and he told me about 50 types of elves that are living in Iceland. Uh,
Wow.
I'm not sure about that many, but the ones that I'm most familiar with, and the ones that I was raised with, you asked me earlier about when how it became. Yeah, my mother started telling me these stories. I remembered when I was like maybe my earliest memory is like 4 or 5 or something like that. And then she talked about these elves that uh, so uh, she had met and played with and so forth. And so it's been always been a part of me. And also my grandmother, she also told me about elves that she had dealings with. Um they helped her with out with milk and different stories. So
I would love to hear these stories. I would love to hear your mother's story and your grandma's story if you could go into it a little bit.
I'll tell my mother's story at the end because it's a little bit of a finale story.
Oh,
Uh,
perfect, perfect. Okay,
but uh, but uh,
let's do
but
that.
so but yeah, the elves are kind of like a part of our DNA. I think according to there's a survey done a couple of years back that showed about you know 20% said basically no, there are no elves. Roughly 20% said yes, there are elves, and then there was about the rest, about 60%, that said neither or. They don't want to outright say that elves don't exist because yeah, because they have been raised to hear these stories. They have been hearing it all around them, and it is better to respect nature and maybe think that something could be out there than to dismiss it outright.
And then to deny it.
Yeah.
Interesting. I find that kind of similar to, like we'll say like Americans or Canadians, about 70% believe in angels. It's a high number that they actually believe in angels. But one of the things is though, is if you've ever told people that you've had an experience with an angel, I'm not saying I've had, but then people think you're crazy. It's kind of like, I believe in angels, and someone says, well, I've had an experience with one. Well, I think you're kind of crazy. Is that, do you find anything like that when someone says, well, I've had an experience with an elf? Is there a lot of people, like a lot of naysayers with that?
Yeah, of course, when people claim to have experienced things that are out of this world, then usually is a certain contingent that wants to outright dismiss it. Uh, but it's still a part of our culture today. Like you mentioned earlier, like a road construction. It's still there was like I think it was like just before COVID, like roughly maybe 6, 7 years ago. They were building like a apartment building in a town like a half an hour from Reykjavik, and they had made like plans, designs for their building, and when they presented the plans in regards of getting building permission, uh, it was pointed out there's an elf rock that would be then demolished or had to be moved if on one corner of the building. And what did they do? They simply changed the drawing or on the construct, so it moved it a little bit, so the stone still stands at the corner of that building, but was not moved or interfered with in any way. And we have several of these, like just like there's a road construction to Artanes now, maybe 10 years ago, where there was a big elf church that a lot of people believed in, and a lot of people came to try to protect it because they were simply going to build a road, like a highway, through that church. And it ended up with, they got huge cranes to move that rock uh, uh, several meters to the left of the road, and it was kept intact. So it is still like a part of our culture, whatever you wanna, if you wanna believe or not. It's still a part of respect nature, respect what others believe, and better be safe than sorry.
I think that's I like that. I like that a lot. Like that that they're the the watchers, the protectors of nature. Now I have to ask questions. So you're referencing a church. How do they know that this specific rock or this location was a church? How did they discover that?
Uh, there are several legends of churches. Some good, some bad. Uh, so some people saying that they hear like choir music and a light from this rock, and just on certain days, some days, and so forth. Um there's also stories about people that are uh, getting disillusioned by the glitter and so forth by the church. So that can be very, very dangerous if you
Like
enter.
almost like hypnotized or something like that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
drawn into it or
yeah,
something. Okay.
drawn into it, and it can be very dangerous because if you enter without permission, then they will harm you. And there are several stories of that, like the elves, kind of like uh, you know kids throwing a stones to a supposedly an elf house. And there was this one kid that said them, stop, no, stop doing this. You don't know what you can yeah, yeah,
You don't know what you're provoking or what you're
yeah,
doing,
yeah,
what you
yeah,
can, the results are. Yes.
exactly. And then later on in life, when he is a little bit older, uh, when he was traveling between from his farm to this small town where he was doing like trades, selling his trades and getting on goods instead. And when he was traveling back, he had a horrible weather, and all of a sudden there's this small light ahead, and there's this man that comes and meets him and invites him in, and there he is uh, fed, and he gets new clothes and so forth, and you know uh, everything, just hospitality 101. And then the day after, he's on. I don't remember. When he goes out, I remember. I know this place, but I don't remember a farm here. And they say, yeah, remember that time, you know, 3 years ago when you forbid the kids to throw stones here. Well, it was so lucky. My son was out there playing, and he almost got hit by the stones, and you stopped that happening. So that's why we saved you today, or last night. And so another fable of you know treat the nature with respect, and hopefully you'll be repaid in kind.
Yes, and definitely, that's a great story, and I find that even though these are could be fables or stories, I do find that they are derived from there's truth in every story, and it's it depends on a lot of times they do get changed and they do get warped a little bit, but I do believe that a lot of these stories and a lot of these legends come from truth. There's a reason that this story arose, and there's a something truly did happen. What specifically, I don't know if we'll ever know, but it's really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So some people believe that the elves are basically in another dimension. So when you're entering, like there's a certain elf home that we visit on our folklore tour in Reykjavik, which looks small on the outside, but it's actually a stately home of the elves. So according to these stories, the when you enter, small opening, you come into this beautiful big house, So the dimensions in the elf world are quite different than ours. So what you see as a small maybe uh, 2 meter rock or something like that is actually an elf rock and not church. It looks different on the outside and on the inside. And so these dimensions are quite interesting. That uh, some people say that the reasons why these stories were kept so long alive with us is that being an island nation, we were not hit as hard by the age of enlightenment, like so when you started to out when you publicly just deny everything that was not fixed in stone. So we managed to keep hold and cherish and nurture these stories longer than many nations in regards of having it still in our DNA in regards of telling our kids stories about these.
Ah, I find that really really fascinating, and I like that concept of kind of like when you enter through, it's kind of like a portal to a different dimension. Like you go, the rock itself is completely different once you enter. Like the space seems, and it reminds me of like on Harry Potter when they had this tent, and you walked into the tent, and it was like on the outside it was a
Yeah,
small little tent, but you walk in and it's huge. And
exactly.
that's the same kind of concept as what you're saying.
Yeah,
And like this isn't the first time that I've heard of beings in a different dimension crossing over. Like this is a like I delve into all manners of curiosities, like cryptids, and Bigfoot is one of them. And it's many people believe that Bigfoot enters from a different dimension. He comes through a different, like a portal. The natives believe that he uses a creek bed as his portal to walk through to come into our reality as well. So it's kind of like where is he? Why can't we ever find him? Well, he's not necessarily always here. He's hanging out somewhere else. So it's
yeah.
I did have one guest who saw a Bigfoot hit a tree with a huge branch, and the tree opened up, and he walked into the tree. So when you're
Mm.
saying rocks are their homes, well, could the trees be the same kind of is that the same type of story that we're hearing as well? Which is I find the connections very fascinating between these stories.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. Stories are, of course, there's a lot of connectivity stories. For example, there's a story that's very prominent in the North Atlantic. We can hear this story or similar type of the story in the Faroe Islands, in Iceland, in North Norway, and more places. So it's a story about so there was this farmer that uh, living in the south of Iceland, and he was a poor farmer and didn't have a lot of luck. Just a young lad, no wife or nothing. And one day he's walking down by the beach or coastline, and kind of like thinking about what to do in regards of life and so forth. And he comes upon these seal skins on the beach, uh, and he hears some singing and laughter, and he goes further a little bit. There's a cave by the beach, by the black sand beach, and he goes into the peeks into the cave, and there are these people dancing there and having fun, like both men and women, beautiful people, and they were simply dancing around uh, this small fire, and uh, and he has heard these stories about these seal people. Uh, so he goes back to the beach and he snacks one of the sealskins, and sure enough, and then he waits and he falls asleep or something. But time passes, and all of a sudden there's this uh, woman that stands before him, and a beautiful naked woman that stands in front of him, and he managed to tell her to come with him to his farm, and she basically changes his luck in life and love. And I'm not gonna finish the whole story, but the basic of the story is that there are these familiar fables, familiar stories in regards of, uh, and if you look at a seal, if you look at the eyes of the seal, it's a really human-like, sometimes peeking up from the ocean, and and uh, and and it's interesting to the connectivity of these stories all to the North Atlantic.
Definitely, I agree totally. Now I'm just going to bring it back to the elves. Now, do you know of any specific places in Iceland that are deeply associated with elf sightings or activity? And have you actually personally visited them yourself?
Yeah, like I said, we visited one elf rock, elf home
Correct. Yes.
that we have heard several stories in connection with. Uh, there's also a place called Hellisgerði, which is a garden and a botanical garden in Hafnarfjörður that sometimes calls itself the Elf Village. They also call themselves the Viking Village and more, but they sometimes they because they have several places where elves live, and there was this seer that unfortunately died a couple of years back that had mapped these elves that lived in this park and basically knew them almost by name and so forth, and had made kind of like a map of these elves. And yeah, then we have several places just like the road construction to Altanes in Great Reykjavik. So you don't have to go far out of Reykjavik to find a place that is connected to the elves, but they are all around Iceland. All around Iceland, you just need to know where to look. There's always an elf rock there, or an elf church there, or some connection to them. You just anywhere you go, but of course you just need to know where a stone is a stone and a stone is a church.
Fair enough. I would hate to, like, let's go with the immigrants. The immigrants moving. Not that there's many, but the ones that have moved to Iceland. To make a fatal mistake of like moving a rock that maybe you shouldn't have. Because you just don't have that knowledge, that prior knowledge. That would be a little detrimental. I know, like here in Mexico, like one of the things when we're talking about like I would say the hidden folk is there's something along that line, within every culture. And here there is called the Alushes, and they're these little people, and they're kind of like caretakers of the land as well, kind of like when you're saying with these elves. And yeah, it's you have to make sure you appease them and keep them happy. And sometimes that is leaving offerings of candy or sweets or treats. Is there something like that where you leave any offerings for the elves or anything like that?
Uh, yeah, there are some stories, but there's also like a tale of a help. For some reason, elf woman had a difficulty having having children. So a woman would uh, uh, several stories about women uh, being asked to come to an elf house or home to help get an elf woman give birth to a child. And because yeah, for some reason, human women have a great talent for that to help elf woman to give birth, and in those cases they got some gifts back. There's a cloth in the National History Museum from elves, for example, and more. So then you would give yeah then you would get some gifts in return, and like I said about my mother's story, my mother, when there was harsh winters, she used to bring milk to the elf stone because to help the elf children there, and so they were not always richer. They sometimes needed help, and then people would help out with what you have. Um, there are some stories in regards of like livestock that uh, you would take care of some livestock. There are several stories like connectivity between these two worlds, so to speak. Um, there's also an interesting story about um, well, a couple of interesting stories that are a little bit unexplained why, but uh, so sometimes uh, uh, children, human children, would change overnight. They were sometimes called changelings. They would they yeah, but in a little bit different concept construct. So children that was always happy and very wise and just like growing up really healthy, all of a sudden started behaving irrationally and screaming and crying and just like uh, yeah, giving their mothers all kinds of difficulties. And in some cases, according to these stories, these were the so-called changelings, where the elves switch switched the children away from their mothers when they were not looking. Maybe uh, you know sometimes these women needed to work also at the farm or something, and they would leave their kid. Uh, and when they came back, the kid had changed. And uh, the way to try to counter that was that there was this woman that had this to happen to her, and she went to this wise woman and asked her, for advice, and the wise woman said, "Yes, now the elves have done you dirty. They have switched your child up, and now you need to do something really, 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 really strange for the actually the old elf that's now taking residence instead of your child. So he will kind of like uh, uh, say he will say he will admit to what he will say that this is strange. And so this woman starts to build some kind of a construct from brooms and so forth and so forth, and from pots and pans, as something of a construct. And then she leads the child into the room, and then the child says, uh, "In all of my 150 years as an elf, I've never seen such a construct. What's this for?" And gives away that he is not a child. And then the punishment is that you need to you need to basically spank or hurt the child until until the elves come back with your child and switch him back.
Oh,
So you take this, according to this fable, they take an old elf and crumble him together into a child, and then and then and then when you spank him, then the elves come, and then he slowly changes back to his former self. I'm not quite sure why this why they do this, but this is at least the story. But if you think about it, if you take an even closer look at this story, it is a little bit dark because if a child, well, developed some kind of disease or you know so what are you gonna beat the child until it changes back to your child,
well,
or you get
I
your
think
child
there
back,
is I agree, but I think there's the precursor though. You build the thing and it emits. If the child emits, well, okay. But it's true though. I agree. It's a little dark on that one.
yeah.
Yeah. I what was I
And
going
so,
to say? Yeah.
sometimes these stories like kind of like, yeah,
Yeah.
they don't make a lot of sense in today's construct, but still funny to
Oh, of course. But this story, I swear I've heard this before too, where they swap out the a human baby with another baby. This is not the first time that I've heard this, and for the life of me, I can't remember where I've heard it, but I have heard this before of this type of methodology, where this happens. So that's interesting that it's not the first time we've heard this, but it's really intriguing that again we're seeing all these connections from different cultures with these different stories. But I
Yeah,
can't remember where that came from though.
yeah. But if you also like, if you think about this construction from the Celtic folklore to the Norse folklore, and they mix together, and then possibly, uh, some some uh, some of the Vikings went raiding and get some new stories to
To add in. Yeah.
so add into the mix, and then you're infused by uh, so uh, so it's just it's wonderful to uh, just how people entertain themselves. Yeah, uh, Iceland is called the story nation. Icelanders are called the story nation for many reasons. It's not just the Icelandic sagas; it's also the way we passed our time in the middle of winter is that we had this baðstofa, these living rooms where everybody, communal rooms where everybody would basically come together. They would maybe be knitting or repairing some tools or stuff like that, and everybody had to tell stories. Literature. A lot of people knew how to read and write, and they entertained themselves by telling each other stories. And everybody was, maybe there was a master storyteller, but everybody needed to tell a story to be part of the community. So it's kind of like, and I think that also comes into play in society today in regards of all this artistic, all this creative. 1 in 10 Icelanders writes a book in his lifetime. We have a thing called the Christmas Book Flute, where every writer in Iceland kind of like releases a book before Christmas because we really love to have books for Christmas presents, for example, and that's my favorite thing to do and to, around Christmas is to read a good book and
That
enjoy.
is really fascinating. I find that really interesting. 1 in 10 it writes a book, which is huge. That's a huge number. And
Yeah.
that was how we used to pass down our history. That was how we used to pass down. Was through spoken word, was through stories, and it's
Yeah.
fantastic that the Icelandic tradition is so strong and very deep and colorful. And I really think that's amazing.
Mm. Yeah, it is a wonderful part of our culture. Of course, with the rise of Netflix, we are also the highest users of Netflix per capita, so we are also binge watching that in the winter. But uh, but I really love this creativity and how people are trying to, yeah, still today, trying to entertain themselves by creating and by being creative. So I think that also just like that's there was a similar guy like the Grimm's Adventures. You have heard about them, the Grimm's
Yes, of
Adventure,
course, of
and
course.
in Germany, there was a similar guy in Iceland called Jón Árnason that collected these folklore stories, all the way from elves to trolls to ghosts to the Yule lads that are part trolls. That's another episode of that we could do yet later about them.
Yes,
The
definitely.
Jólasveinadir. But yeah, so he managed to save a lot of these stories, and that's why we're still like I love to re tell my boys, for example, maybe one story every now and then.
I like that. I like that a lot. It's a very, very colorful, history and traditions that you guys have, and that is beautiful. So, one last question here, or a couple of
Mm.
last questions is, you know, um, now have you heard of any recent accounts or sightings of elves in Iceland, and how do they compare with any of the older stories?
Yes, I've heard about a person that saw uh, like a like a pack of basically riders, elf riders that were riding in the middle of the country where there should not be writers, and according to him, he was certain that they were elves. They had this glow about them, and well, if you take a look at Lord of the Rings or whatever you want to call it, it's a similar thing. It's like these majestical beings that are a little bit, a little bit
Yeah, like
otherworldly.
other world. I agree. Whenever they showed them, it's kind of like they show kind of like the shimmer about them as well. And they kind of maybe smooth their features too. And I
Mm.
think it definitely gives this otherworldly magical look to them.
Yeah, but like I said, I'm not selling more expensive than I heard it. But your other question was okay. Alps recently, yeah. This just was like roughly a year ago.
Okay.
Uh, and the second one was
Uh,
sorry.
I just said, how did that compare to the older stories? But I don't know if there's a real comparison with that.
No, I haven't heard for a long or for a spell in regards of communication, actual like communication with elves. Something that happened between but I was, like I said, born and raised hearing several stories. So I
Yeah.
think
So
I think it I
why
think it
don't
has
we?
just
Oh, I was
yeah
going to say, why don't we go to that? Why don't we go to your mother's story then? Because we're getting close to our hour here. Why
yeah
don't we go to that story? It's a good finale. You were saying.
okay. So my mother has told me several stories in regards of her dealings with the elves. So she lived in this farm to the north, in a place called Bakkasel that's now deserted, and you can actually see it. There are several beautiful pictures of that uh, isolated house yeah, on the World Wide Web. So she was living there, and she was playing with these elf children when she was growing up. And according to her, she when there was harsh winter, she used to, uh, take something from the pantry and bring to the stone, kind of like the helping the elves out. And fast forward a couple of years, and she was giving birth to me. She was having a really hard labor at the hospital, and she was just afraid of the. She didn't know if she's going to have a girl or a boy. She was just simply afraid about the life of her child. And all of a sudden, this blue-clad woman walks into the room, and of course, the rest of the people did not see her. She walks straight to my mother and tells her, uh, "Hi, Steinar, my mother's name. You were always so kind to my children back in the day. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things. You're going to have a beautiful boy, and he's going to be perfectly okay. And I'm going to protect him for the rest of his life." So I've seen this woman a couple of times when I've been traveling. Uh, Usually when I'm like that, but uh, uh, when I'm having a hard time, when I'm lost. Uh, but usually it's after a couple of beers. So maybe that helps. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm closer to seeing the dimension or whatever. But
Well, they
but I
do
know.
say
But
alcohol is like imbues you with spirits because hence it's called spirits. So maybe it helps you, to cross over a little bit to the other side. Be able to be a more relaxed and see.
yeah, I think it has helped in several places. But I know that when things get tough, I ask uh, her for help, and so far so good.
That is, I love that. I love how that wraps up. I want to say thank you so much, Valor, for spending some time with us today. It took an hour of your time, and I really really appreciate that. Can you just tell everybody else where they can find one last time where they can find you?
Yes, we are at the website yourfriendlyreykjavik.com. We have a couple of experiences that are related to the elves. We have the folklore tour, Reykjavik folklore tour. We have a new experience called the storyteller, Icelandic storyteller, that will focus about traveling around Iceland in stories, but just like in a cozy environment. Then we also have a elf and nature driving tour where we visit a couple of these places that are related to the elves, like Hellisgerði, the botanical garden in Hafnarfjörður. We visit several places that are connected to the elves in the great Reykjavik area, and also some beautiful nature pearls there in that area. So, and yeah, we love to do custom tours. So if you want to get in touch and we can plan your trip to Iceland, then we would love to help.
Perfect. I love that. Again, thank you so much, Valor, and we'll talk later. All right.
Next is Icelandic Yule.
Yes, I'm down with that. Okay, for sure.
Okay.
You
Have a
take
good.
care.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. That was Valur, and I want to thank him so much for taking the time to talk to us about the elves in Iceland. That was something that I heard about. Also, the trolls and as well. That's something else I heard about. I have a friend of mine, Blake from Mountain Man Explore the Truth. He was interested in the trolls of Iceland, and I was saying that I was interested in the elves, and I'm glad I found Valur. And so it's very interesting how they're all tied. A lot of them, they're tied with like moral lessons. A lot of the stories, a lot of the folklore has these moral lessons, and I think we can take that away from everything. Is just be kind, because you don't know. You should just be kind because you should be kind, but you don't know if it's an elf that you're helping out, and in the future, you might have a lady in blue watching over you. And with that, everyone, I want to say, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wander wide, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosity wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies. Aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the cold gas flame is the light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies. Aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the cold gas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back.